This session is very much designed to be absolutely interactive, so we want to get as many of you involved as possible. Basically, it's an Ask Me Anything section. So any advice you want to get about helping with your startup business, then we have experts on hand to offer you that. Now, I think the best way we can get things kicked off is actually getting our experts to introduce themselves a little bit, because they are guys with years and years of experience in investing and accelerating projects, so they can tell you what they specialize in, and hopefully then when you get to ask a question, you can guide it towards the person that you would like to help answer that for you. So Joseph, do you want to go first?
Yeah. Hi, this is Joseph Ho from Brinc. I am actually the program director for health within Brinc. So we actually accelerate a lot of health startups, and I'm very passionate about health, wellness, and fitness. So I look forward to this AMA section today.
Emmanuel?
Oh, okay, that was pretty short. You've got more to offer.
Yeah. No, let's keep it tight so everyone can ask questions.
All right, then. Emmanuel Hui, started a company myself, went public in 2020. Now I invest in Hong Kong under Tiger Jade. Tiger Jade is the US dollar investment arm of Tiger Med in Hong Kong. And we have investments in every single university already. And we have projects ongoing and looking forward to building up Hong Kong as a real ecosystem for life science translation. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, Adrian.
Thank you, everyone. My name's Adrian Lam. I'm managing partner of Bioworld Ventures. What Bioworld is a group of industry experts. We're all experienced within the industry, developing. I used to run R&D at some of the large Fortune 500 companies, launching products into the FDA. So the idea is to bring our network and our group in Bioworld to help the local ecosystem with network, with resources, with strategic insight. And so buzz me for any questions, and we'll pretend to be an expert.
They're very much experts. So if you do have a question, raise your hand and someone will come with a microphone to you. Tell us who you are, what your question is, and who you would like to ask it to. Now, I can see we've already got a keen participant, but can I just do one thing before we start, and that is ask you guys, what is the most common question each of you is asked? Do you want to start, Adrian? Let's go the other way around this time.
Wow, great. First,
no pressure.
You know, there's a lot of pertinent questions. I'll start with the easy one, which is how to find product market fit, right? So you're a healthcare company, you're trying to solve a problem. To me, there's a couple of things I always tell people. One is that the world is flat in terms of healthcare and technology. What that means is that I encourage you to look at different countries, different approaches, different companies. Don't just look at your neighbor in Hong Kong, in the other university. Look at England. Look at what they're doing in Spain. And I think you'll find a lot of competitors, and you'll start to learn about their different approaches and their different strategies about how they're tackling and defining the problem. And the second thing is to really think about the history of your area and your development. I think the best entrepreneurs, especially in healthcare, are actually very keen medical historians.
Emmanuel.
I mean, people, when they talk to me, they want me to write a check. So the question is always, what would it take for me to write a check?
You've got to be convincing.
and it's a pretty straightforward answer. I think, you know, what I'm looking for is data.
Just be good.
Yeah, just be good, right? Yeah, and I need a good team, good data, good science, good. But what does that mean? I'm very risk averse personally. From my side, I like to look at data. I like to see PK/PD, ideally already some human data if possible, before I make any sort of investment. And I know this is very sort of a bit irresponsible for me to say, in the sense that some companies raise hundreds of millions of dollars and they don't even enter phase 1 or have zero patient data to show. But because Hong Kong is such a new budding industry, I'm looking for assets that are actually quite mature already, but haven't had that first institutional investment, haven't had that first check to help them grow. That's ideal for me, I think. If they already have some solid data, that some other multiple $100 million company probably doesn't even have that on their own pipeline yet. But if you're a professor, you've already gotten a couple grants to do that, fantastic. That's what I like, and that's for me, yeah.
Got it, great. How about you, Joseph?
I think it's very similar. I mean, we actually deal with a lot of startups, and they come to us looking for funding. And then I turn the question around and go, how can we help you? And I want to understand their founders, their story, their product market fit. Does it resonate? A lot of things that we find that a lot of founders in health, they're very passionate. they have stories to tell. Like either their family or their friends had illness, so that's what they're very motivated to go forward. And that's what I also want to see. But then, do they have the right product fit? Can they scale? So it becomes a very interactive dialogue between us to see whether we can help them or not.
Okay, great stuff. Let's hand it over to the floor. We've got one question already. Can we? What would you like to ask, and who would you like to ask it of?
I think maybe Joseph. Like just now, you're referring to, you look at the scales and the story. So what other ways that you would look for a startup to say yes?
We look at, of course, the founders. I mean, we actually look at really early stages. So we look at the founders' background. Have they exited before? Are they able to raise funds? Who is actually on the cap table? Those are the things that we look for first. And then we actually, I like to ask friends or industries in the product, does it make sense? Do they have a viable product? I like to try and test things myself. Well, sometimes you get apps from our startups, and I like to download it and play with myself to see if there's any friction, if there's any like a consumer journey, how does that work? Sometimes it's very technical. I go, well, it doesn't work because there's so much friction for me to actually use it. So those are things I would look at for.
Okay, we've got another question from the floor here. Yes, tell us who you are, what question, and who you'd like to answer.
Yeah, so just to follow up on that earlier questions on the founders, I guess apart from the science, apart from the data that needs to be good and better or best, it's all about the team, right? And the human aspect of it. So could you maybe pick on a few personality, character traits that you would like to see in the founders that are more likely to succeed?
Sure, I can go first. Thank you, Philip, for the question. A few of the traits that we look out for. So actually, it's related to the first point I made about being a medical historian. You know, for an as an example, I met a company recently in the diabetes space, and you know, he informed me that actually diabetes is a very interesting a disease in the way that it's been treated surgically in the beginning, in the first instance. So it used to be a surgical intervention, and then the pharmacological agents came along, and they did really well with metformin and the DPP-4s, and then now, of course, everybody knows about the GLP-1s, and of course, synthetic insulin. Now, this company and some of the other ones are actually looking to reverse diabetes using more surgical methods again, minimally invasive surgical, and trying to move away from the pharmacology side of things, which I think is absolutely fascinating. And for those of you who haven't seen this company before, Virta Health, absolutely amazing company. Reverse diabetes using just a tech regimen. It is an approved, FDA-approved tech regimen, and took people off drugs and reduced HbA1c. It's absolutely ridiculous. So anyway, I'm on a red herring here, but my point is that I think understanding medical history, understanding the context of the problem you're trying to solve in all aspects, right? And then also having a really clear understanding about who your customer actually is. A lot of the time, it's actually not the patient, right? When is the patient ever choosing your drug or your device, right? Sometimes it's not even the doctor. Maybe it's the procurement director. Maybe it's a distributor, for instance. So I think someone who really understands context and someone who really understands history, to me, really stands out. And I would encourage all of you to think about your businesses that way and be that founder.
Well, but founders can have all the knowledge in the world, and that's great. But if at the end of the day he's sorry, this is a radio host. We got to make sure we watch our language, right?
Well, you're live streaming, you know, it's up to you guys.
If he's a rude person, starts with an A, the word I have in mind. You wouldn't want to work with them because, I mean, we do healthcare investments. We're looking at working with the founder for 10 plus years. That's longer than your average marriage. Right, the Financial Times says your average marriage is 9.7 years or something like that, and an exit is at year 12. I mean, I got to work with this founder for 12 years. Come on, I mean, I gotta be able to argue with him, to fight with him, to work with him, cry with him, laugh with him.
We only work with those A guys.
Yeah.
Exclusively.
we gotta figure it out. I mean, for me at least, you know, yes, definitely, you gotta be foundationally strong, but again, the integrity of the person, how they treat others. I met with this. Another big investor in China, and he says every time before he invests, he has hot pot with the founder. Why? He has hot pot with the founder and the founding team so that he sees how the founder treats his team. Is he doing the meat for himself? Is he hoarding the sauce? Is he serving other people? Is he serving his team tea? And he would play games with his team and have them play games and see, oh, who's the go-to person that this founder approaches? You know, he plays a game where they write a word on the head and put on a sticky note, and you have to do like 10 questions to guess who you are. And he sees like, okay, they're on question 8. They still can't figure out who's the person they go to get. And then, oh, apparently I go to Joseph because I trust him. I have a rapport with him. And then, so that's actually the real guy that's working in my company. That's actually a key person that I should interview and get to know better. And I thought that's a really interesting way, a hot pot dinner, to figure it out. The integrity, character, and your workability, teachability, how you communicate with the founder is something that I deal with on a daily basis. I mean, yesterday I had a founder come to me crying. Very difficult time. You know, a very, very difficult situation with fundraising at the moment, and trying to find solutions, trying to calm down, even sitting down and praying with him, you know, sometimes. That's what it entails.
Well, let's actually move on to that, because we've had numerous questions emailed in ahead of the event, and quite a few of them were around the funding environment and how healthy that is, particularly what's the sentiment like at the moment, how has that changed post-pandemic, and how do you find a middle ground as a startup to get that project over the line to convince that investor to get on board with you? So, Adrian, do you want to take a go on that?
Joseph, do you want to?
Or Joseph?
Right now, like, it is a challenging world right now for raising funds. I think and that's why it's actually having a partnership syndicate model works, right? Working with different investment partners and then having conviction in that startup. What real world application or problem they're trying to solve? Can they scale? I mean, the other day myself and my team were actually talking to a startup in India, and they were focusing on women's health. Something that we take for granted here is actually a big issue in India. And actually, I can see that resonate and scale up because I have a conviction in that company. And how do I actually take that, help them, and show it to different investors? That's one thing I can help with.
Okay. Anything else you'd like to add on the fundraising environment at the moment?
I'll add something, which is clearly the fundraising environment is extremely difficult. It is tough beyond compare, actually. Now, what I will say is to the people trying to raise capital, what's more important, right? Is it to have more share of a pie where the risk is actually you end up nobody having a pie? Or is it a small piece of a pie that exists, right? Or a growing pie? And I think you need to think very long and hard about the risk symmetry. If you try to be too, it's a buyer's market right now, right? And if you're too, if you're too rigid on your valuation and your terms, you might lose a deal. What's the biggest downside is actually you don't have capital, your company goes under. That is the most extreme bad risk, right? On the other side, if you give away a little bit more economics, a little bit more terms, maybe some reporting requirements, in a way, what's the big deal? That's not going to kill you. And so I think having a very open mind, I think a lot of the time for founders, especially first-time founders, like kind of looking inward at your own pride and ego sometimes. It's your baby. You want it to survive. You want it to thrive even. But you got to be very realistic about matching the temperature of the outside. And I think it's key to survive and not die. And then you can think about switching to thriving mode when the market gets better. I think right now weathering the storm And so I think take all the opportunities that you can get. I think you need to be very creative about where you raise that money. It's not just from risk capital and VCs. Think about different incubation schemes. Every man and their dog and country is trying to launch all these startup schemes. Maybe you're eligible for something not in Hong Kong. And maybe it's a remote program. Maybe there's a corporate grant somewhere, right? You know, J Labs and Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and a lot of the government funders have mandated, you know, like special missions. If you're compliant and you're consistent with that and you align to that, you could get some non-dilutive grants. You know, so I think you need to look very wide and broad and just be very open-minded.
Yeah, I think in general the whole market is having a readjustment of risk tolerance. And what is used to be appropriate risk for an early stage VC may no longer be appropriate risk now. And I think you as a founder, what your key is, you have to understand what is the risk acceptance of your funding source at that time. At your current time, actually, because you know, for example, for me, I am much more okay with early stage, earlier. If your data is not all the way there yet, your patents are not yet fully filed, I'm okay with that, as long as the next round funding person, the next round of financing is sort of more or less secured. So, but then the people later are not comfortable committing to the deal unless you already have your patents and your management team and your ESOP and everything figured out. So, I mean, for me as an investor and the next stage investor, our risk tolerances have shifted such that I am comfortable with what they are not comfortable with. And so I am okay with doing all the work that makes them comfortable. But I'm only comfortable if they're comfortable to invest. So, you know, it's like multiple levels of conditional agreements, I think, to adjust risk, to adjust sentiment, and to meet different investors and grant providers' expectations. I think at the moment, that's what we're seeing, is people are coming down to really being careful about actually what is a tolerable risk for my investment portfolio, and whether it's my investment portfolio as a professional investor or as a government agency, what is appropriate risk for my grant foundation? These are questions that are being more rigorously tested now than before, when it was more easy to give money, when it was, oh, just invest. You know, we like the founder, go ahead. But now it's, you know, the risks are being more thought out, I think. Yeah.
I mean, also to add to that, I think echoing Emmanuel's point, I think in the past, when there's a bull market, people are more willing to take a risk. Now, I think readjusting the risk, we want to see a product, we want to see traction, we want to see partnerships, we want to see revenue, right? And those are things that we look for in this current environment.
Yeah, just one last sentence.
Okay.
One thing I noticed is that 2 years ago, you said platform, and it's interesting. Now, platform suggests wasting money. You know, you want one indication, one set of patients, one treatment, one solution. Focus on that. Don't waste don't waste money, and just get that validated.
Yeah, unless you're like Moderna, right? And then you're sitting on a couple $100 million. You never need to raise for 10 years. Fantastic. But
right.
we don't have that in Hong Kong. We don't have that luxury yet. Yeah, yeah.
All right, let's move on to an area that I think the previous panel did address a little bit, but let's have a look more at the regulatory environment, because we had a couple of questions emailed in that are talking about the current regulatory environment for telemedicine and health tech, and how they relate specifically here in Hong Kong, and how can a startup ensure they remain compliant while that regulatory environment is evolving. Emmanuel, you look like you've got thoughts on that.
It's a very difficult area because once you do telemedicine and you do prescription medicine and you are doing you are diagnosing patients, then you fall under the regulatory regimes of that particular jurisdiction. Then it becomes difficult. So personally, I've invested in a pet telemedicine platform, which is much easier because the vets are not regulated. And so you can be a stay-at-home mom that, you know, now you choose to stay home, but then you are a certified vet. You can be in Australia and then it's your nighttime, it's our daytime. You have a patient here that then telecalls in while you're at home, while you're, you know, and you can sort of tele-prescribe for the pet. And usually we see a lot of cases are gastro cases. Oh, my pet just vomited. What is this? Is this safe? Or it's a skin disease. Oh, what's this rash? Why is the fur falling off? And that's okay. You know, that's easy. And prescription for that is also easy because you just need a local supply chain, that local pharmacy that stocks that, and they can easily just so I'm comfortable with pets so far. I haven't figured out the human part.
We need to move on to humans,
yeah,
right?
The human part is very complicated because then you need a local person who is responsible, taking the legal responsibility, insurance-wise as well, to be, okay, yes, we can have a teleconsult. That's an opinion, a second opinion. But at the end of the day, you need to have a localized, licensed person to be the one that's taking the legal responsibility of prescribing, of diagnosing. And that is the most difficult part, no matter what jurisdiction you're in.
Well, this surely gets more difficult once you try starting to operate across multiple jurisdictions and you're trying to deal with different regulatory environments, right?
Yes, so if it is, I mean, right, honestly, at the moment, if you say Southeast Asia and you try to do it, it's too complex for me. I have no appetite for that. But if you say China or US, then it's already such a saturated market. So what else can you do? Where's the innovation? Then I don't know. Maybe the innovation is in improving these existing systems and networks instead of building a new one, and having buy-in from the local jurisdiction and buy-in from the local regulatory structures is the key. I don't think. I don't know. What do you?
Yeah, I think I mean it is very, very tough because each regulator has their own policies. Everyone has their own different flavor about privacy, data transfer, you know, system compliance and cybersecurity and all that. What I think in Hong Kong, I come from the medical device and med tech space, and actually, interestingly, in Hong Kong, there's basically no regulation. You can just come in with a device, and as you can get a doctor or a hospital to use it, you're good. Which is a bit fast and loose, admittedly, and actually the barrier for entry is actually the doctor looking at the data and the safety and all that, and he's the gatekeeper, so to speak. Extending to things like to digital health and other platforms, I think you start looking at like the HIPAA side of things, the GPDR side of things, right? Right now, it's still unclear. They're very high-level policies, but then when you actually go into implementation, when your companies are building out firmware, for instance, and they're building that data transfer protocol, they realize that actually there's not that much detail that governs that. So what I would do, what I typically do, in this respect, I'm an investor advising our companies, is, look, we're always going to be looking at the more mature markets as regulators. Right now, this is like forefront for the US FDA, right? Someone mentioned SAMD earlier, software as a medical device. We have, something like 526 AI or machine learning-based products out there. And actually, the problem is they are all very, very different in terms of how they were regulated, because the FDA also is trying to develop this in lockstep with the industry. So what I would do is I would observe a few of the big companies and their products, like for us in med tech. Look at Medtronic's new AI and machine learning assistant for a few of their cardiac devices. I believe it's called MiniMed, or I forgot the name of it actually, it skips my mind. Look at Abbott's system, look at all the different, look at J&J's system for how they're doing their digital surgery, you know, and actually a lot of you'll see a lot of service providers also put out a lot of thought pieces and thought leadership. I in particular really enjoy, for instance, reading about, I follow like Weiss Institute, Broad Institute at MIT, Feinstein's Institute from Mount Sinai, and these research groups start having a lot of market intelligence. They get their PIs to write pieces on this, and I find those sources to be extremely helpful. Maybe even slightly more helpful than your typical McKinsey insights and and definitely more insightful than your investment banking reports. So that's maybe one place to kind of look for some guidance.
Okay, now don't forget, if you have got a question out there on the floor, do let us know. Stick your hand up and we will get around to your questions. I'm going to carry on with some of the emailed ones now, which are just looking at, you mentioned innovation, Emmanuel, so let's get into that. And what are some of the most recent healthcare innovations and discoveries that you think will revolutionise patient care over the next, say, 5 years? I mean, I know that's quite a time frame and there's probably a lot that could happen in that time.
Actually, not much can happen in that time.
Okay.
Because you think about clinical trials, phase 1, 2, 3, probably a couple of the assets we have in the pipeline will barely get through phase 2 or 3 in 5 years. And I'm just thinking through that. I think Adrian talked about this in another conference. It's about combining existing technologies and taking two known things, making it more efficient, making a new thing. So, mRNA technology and exosomes is one thing, a deal that we invested in. Both are well-established technologies, safety profile well understood, but then putting the two together into a consistent formulation that then delivers mRNA, topically, or specifically with antibody moieties that then, in a targeted way, or maybe even looking at a lot of CAR-T and a lot of things coming out right now, but just taking known bispecific methods to enhance the efficacy of the CAR-T. I think in 5 years, which is not a long time in terms of healthcare investments, I think that's how we control risk and think about development, is taking known things and making it work better together. Yeah.
I'm just thinking in a different way, like using digital devices. Now that everyone has, I look at my Apple Watch and that's health play. But there's more and more data available now. People I see my friends having heart monitors, Garmin's, Apple Watches. They can actually monitor their health data. And that becomes more and more important, that if they have any things come up, they can actually go see a doctor because of your instruments that you have, wearables, consumables, that is becoming more and more consumer grade.
Okay, let's look at a couple of questions we've had around business models and market fit. And one of the key things that was asked is, how do you manage to conduct some pilots and introduce your products maybe to service public hospitals? Is that something that you could look at for us, Adrian?
I think the guy on my right is probably the best.
Okay.
Totally copy.
Public hospitals, you're talking about the investigator-initiated study, the test trial, IIT system. And that, it's not easy in that you really need to have buy-in from a local professor.
That's actually what I was going to say, is to look, public health systems are usually capacity constrained. That's the first thing. And the second thing is they are usually, they have certain mandates and missions, right, relating to their grant or their research lab, and they have a couple of things that they have to hit, right? So if you are within that area, then I think it's relatively more simple to get that engagement. But I think either way, you need to find a collaborator who can be your internal champion.
Yeah, I will say it's especially hard in Hong Kong because the professors are so well paid. It's like they're not incentivized and the KPIs are not properly aligned, such that why should they spend time out of their day to work with a new startup that barely has any money to do a new, unless you're not paying the professor a lot, you're not allowed to pay them a lot. So then how do we incentivize a professor to do a clinical study for your new asset?
So how do we incentivize them? What needs to happen to change that?
So I've seen a couple models. One is really innovative new technology that really will help them publish new papers and make high impact factor papers in journals. That's like sort of the overall blanket #1 thing that Hong Kong professors want. They want to publish and they want high impact factors. And so, okay, so it's really innovative research that probably is outside of our investment scope a lot of times. Because if it's so new and it's so innovative, then that it's going to be published in a 20+ impact factor paper, then it's probably outside of our scope because we want to see more traction and patient data and history before we make an investment. So it's sort of out of our scope. And then the other is if we actually just pay them a lot. So you got to figure out a way to raise that capital, to incentivize them, give them equity in your company, to get them a part as a scientific advisory board, or just somehow such that it's aligned, and also the university. like getting the university's tech transfer office or their department, or to somehow to make sure your incentives are as aligned as possible with the limited resource that you have. And I don't know, and sometimes it's just, you just gotta have coffee with the guy. You just gotta find him and just gotta, you know.
It's a bit like the hot pot story again,
Yeah,
isn't it,
it's
really?
back to the hot pot story. Yeah, you gotta convince them that you know, your asset is worth supporting.
Right. So let's.
Oh wait, sorry. But
Okay.
let me add. China is easier. In that the Chinese system in China for doing clinical studies is much faster, much more streamlined, much more systematic than doing it in Hong Kong.
So it might be worth looking there instead.
Oh, absolutely. Please, I mean, the Chinese Academy of Sciences has so many resources and so many junior professors that are eager and willing to do clinical trials to prove themselves. I think looking at our counterparts across the border is a very quick, and the FDA accepts that data. You know, as long as it's reported to the FDA, as long as the clinicaltrial.gov you're registered appropriately, and you make sure everything is up to standard, you can take that data and use that in your provisionary filing with the US FDA, which you will eventually have to do anyways. And then eventually you go on to a multi-center clinical study where you do studies in China, US, Hong Kong, and then I'll be happy to come and write a check. I think that's when yeah.
So let's get another question in, which is about the appetite for the private market to adopt digital healthcare in Hong Kong. How healthy is that, and what demand is there for that? Joseph, I reckon that's one you might be able to answer for us.
I think in Hong Kong, people are very digital native, very digital savvy. I think we have a lot of early adopters in Hong Kong that are willing to try the latest things. And so I think Hong Kong, a lot of the new consumer or health companies come to Hong Kong first to trial things as a testing board. If it works, they can scale up. So I think Hong Kong is a very digital native place.
Just to stir things up a bit, I actually completely disagree.
Yeah.
No, I mean, jokes aside, I do disagree slightly in the way that I think Hong Kong, I've found, is actually a very, very conservative place in terms of medical practice. A lot of the doctors are a little bit British, a little bit, suppose Commonwealth country trained. And doctors are very conservative animals in general. And anything that disrupts their flow, their practice, their habits, I think is actually quite difficult to do. And so that's why I see a lot of businesses that are saying, oh, we want to be point of care testing for XYZ, or we want to get doctors to use another app. I mean, an endocrinologist I just spoke to, he's already having to use like 6 different apps, right? Freestyle Libre for Abbott, he's on that system. He's on Dexcom G6, moving to G7 for another one of their patients for the CGM, the real-time tracker patch. They're looking at different diabetes regimens. They have an app for Eli Lilly to bring up some information. They have an app with Novo. Are you seriously going to ask them to learn another app on top of that?
Sounds like we need some integration of these apps, quite frankly.
It's just too many, right? No matter how digitally native you are. And so I think actually one of the more interesting solutions is actually not in adding another app, but in thinking one level up. There's a business which actually now, a Bright Insight, it's actually set up, I think in Germany or maybe the UK, I forgot, by one of the large companies. And it aims to be the OS for all of these apps. It's kind of like, for those of you in finance, it's a little bit like Bloomberg, where you have a data cache, a pool of a database, and your UX UI is there for you to pick certain information and data from that cache. And then it will display it to you in the way that you want. Bloomberg then is the QC for all the inputs. So instead of me going to Hong Kong Stock Exchange for filings, me going to different news sources and the corporates for their presentation materials, Bloomberg does that for me. It would be nice if there was a platform like that in healthcare where they could be responsible for filtering and QCing and checking the cybersecurity and all that for all the various different apps. And perhaps there would be one platform that would be kind of like the Bloomberg for medicine. I think that would be highly helpful, actually. And that could, and I think there's a couple of companies starting to look at that, which I find to be fascinating.
Whoever wins that race will do well.
Yeah.
But you don't have to win that race as well. I feel like if you're an app developer in Hong Kong or you're developing some sort of software, build it to sell. You don't need to be your own standard platform. You don't need to be IPO yourself, and forget it. You know, there's so many people out there. They need to consolidate. They need to build it to sell, and just try to understand the incumbents and why they're not good. And then instead of trying to build a competing product that's better, build a product that they can buy. And I'm happy to have 3x, 4x exits. I think last year that's what I spoke about last year. Is I'm happy with multiple 3x exits instead of 30x exits and then like 9, the rest of them are all failures. I mean, yes, the economics balance out in a portfolio, but you know, I'm happy with 3x buyouts, 2x even in this market. Yeah.
Okay, now we did have a question earlier on the getting involved with the public hospitals. There's another question sort of along similar lines, but this is looking at the health insurance space, and this is how can digital health startups best engage with health insurance companies, and governments might be included in this mix too, on pilots that they want to get involved in. Are any of you experts on the insurance side of things, or?
No.
No.
To be honest.
Okay.
I did ask this question though from I'm a venture partner at a digital health VC called Verge. They're based in Singapore. Some of you might have met Scarlett Chen. Yeah. Scarlett, I asked this question of Scarlett recently actually, and she used to be she's been at Prudential for 6 years, head of venture and strategic operations and initiatives, and she tried to do something similar inside. And the problem is that insurance, because of their long-term contracts, they need to be very careful about anything new that introduces risk, actuarial risk into their pricings and to their risk management systems. And so generally speaking, they are huge oil tankers that like a disruptive move is like, you know, but for them, I think they have a lot of vested interests, right? You know, a little bit of a pharmacoeconomic study on a treatment that will help save them 2% of their funds on a particular disease area. That actually translates to probably like 15 billion US. You know, but what it does mean is that you need to be very rigorous on your data, and you need to probably run, for a technology company, you need to extend that beyond validating your technology. And what I mean by that is animal trials or maybe clinical data and so forth, but then extending that to the economic side of things, that it actually save your customer the dollars that they need to save. And you also, and actually the pool is not so wide. You need to be targeting those downstream customers where you can help them, and that help is direct. You can actually help save their money, not the government's money or not their patients' money. You need to save them money. That's your customer.
Right.
Yeah, I want to add to that. I think today, earlier today, we had a chap named Metal from AI Ventures. So they actually look at new innovation and new technologies that can help them, but it's a side arm of AIA. So these are more forward-thinking, more fast-moving, more liberal branch of these insurance companies. So I think there are wings with them that are looking.
So it's do your research and approach the right people there. Let me ask you a question, all of you, that I'm certain you can answer, and that is, what intrigues you as an investor about startup? Wow. A wall of silence. You have to think hard about this one. Gosh.
I'll go first.
Okay, great. Thank you, Adrian.
Actually, it's a logical journey for me. I started in the public markets. Actually, I used to be, for half my career, I was an R&D engineer and I led R&D teams. And then I came back and I went into the public markets. And what I realized is, as an individual and one with some network in the space, you can't really help public companies. I can't help Medtronic that much as an individual. My personal alpha is huge with a startup, and I find that impact, that help makes my work more interesting, and then it just naturally steered me towards earlier and earlier stage companies. I could actually do something that made a difference, and that's very exciting for me. That's my impetus and my inspiration.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think that there's a follow-on question about that, about how involved do venture capitals typically get in the operations and decision-making of the startups. When you choose that company that intrigues you, how involved do you get with them?
As much as they let me.
Okay.
And you know, to be honest, you don't want to be that intrusive. And I think it's understanding the personality of the founder, right? Sometimes they don't want to ask, right? Maybe it's a show of weakness. To me, I think everyone's an ally in the ecosystem, right? The pie is way too big. The challenges are way too large. I think everyone needs to help each other. So that's my mindset. And so I always encourage people to speak openly. And some of the best founders, I feel, are the ones who have no ego. And they're just like, I don't know this. I don't know that. I don't know this either. What's your thought? And it becomes so easy. And then I'll also tell them, I have no idea. Building rapport, yeah.
All right, now what about the economics of the situation? You know, you've chosen a startup. How do you assess the scalability and like the growth potential? And how important is that to you when you are picking who to invest in? Emmanuel, why don't you answer that one?
Let me go back to the word intrigue.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's the word that I'm held up on. And what intrigues me, I consistently find, is when there are other investors in the market. Investors talk. I mean, Adrian, Joseph, we talk all the time. And when they love something that I just don't get, or I choose not to invest in, but they all love it, I don't get it. That intrigues me. That intrigues me. Because I'm like, what am I missing here? What am I? And I track those with great interest, because I want to know what I got wrong, or what I'm missing, what I don't understand. Maybe I'm right. Maybe they're all wrong. And then that's very intriguing, because all of a sudden I'm right, they're all wrong. But then I think it's learning that learning process is what's most intriguing for me. And then oftentimes it is, I feel like a common how do you say, a common reason for why we disagree is how we view the market. It's how we view the potential market. And actually recently Adrian and I disagreed on a deal. And it's because we disagreed on the market potential of this very startup. You know, and we come from very different perspectives. You know, from my CRO background support, you know, I ask internally. You know, TigerMed has 10,000 scientists around the world. We do our internal checking, and the scientists, as a consensus, just didn't come to a consensus where they were like, we don't think this is going to work, we don't like it. Probably too many brains at a table isn't too helpful sometimes, because you need somebody with vision to drive it. But when I get that feedback and I myself am not too convicted, I chose not to invest. But he thought differently about this company, and then he saw, oh, no, this really world-changing potential, and the market size is huge. And whereas we're like, oh, there have been incumbents, and they all failed. And so that intrigues me, and I think that the market potential is what consistently causes us to disagree. And
I think Joseph has something to add here.
I use the word impact, right? Does it make an impact? To how many people? Which countries? Does it solve a problem? And for that is the starting point for me. And then I dig deeper. I consult with my colleagues, friends, investors. Like, what do you think? Right? Here's the market. Does it solve a real case? Does it make things better? It could be very simple. It could be simple. It doesn't have to. It could be like maybe solving health logistics in a third world country. It can be simple as that, but it makes an impact.
There's another deal that we agreed on, but then the rest of the TigerMed team didn't agree on, and we invested anyways. That intrigues me. And that one we follow with great interest as well, because it was like, yeah, like, you know, we think this is going to be great, and it's doing really well. And every time the founder comes to Hong Kong, we're very excited to meet him. Yeah, and it goes back to the middle question you were asking, is how we add value as investors. For me, it's quite clear, because I've got a CRO backing me, and the CRO can then hopefully help these companies. But at the end of the day, it's up to the company itself whether it wants to work with us or not. We never force any founders to have to use our services. We never force it upon them, and it's never a condition. We have conflict of interest committees that are in place to make sure and everything's fair. But yeah, that's how we can very, very solidly help startups. Yeah.
I mean, for us, it's very simple. We actually put them through a program. So we actually have mentors, advisors. We look at their go-to-market strategies, their marketing, their how to pitch, the data rooms. So we actually help them in very many ways for early stages.
All right, I'm going to move on to another question I think that Adrian and Emmanuel might have a difference of opinion on. And this is a question about where to set up. Is Hong Kong a good place to set up? Who wants to start?
Yes. I think my view on this, I'll keep it short. I think we're running out of time and we want to leave some time for open questions. I think it really depends what type of business you are, right? If you're super clinical, so you need a lot of infrastructure, you need to look to where that is. Actually, I think people always ask about Hong Kong versus Singapore. I look at them as very similar places in some respects in terms of the goals and the mandates of the government. But what I find in Singapore is they have a little bit more manufacturing, and they have more corporates there already, because it's kind of a jumping off spot for ASEAN, right? So in Hong Kong, I think Hong Kong is a great place because the capital market is here. And so you need to choose your battles, right? Are you a business that requires a lot of medical infrastructure, animal trials, GMP facilities and clinical labs and all that? In which case you only really have, Science Park really, right? Otherwise, you're in town and you don't have access to that equipment. If you're something a little bit more digital health and a little bit like less hardcore clinically, then I think you have a lot more. You have the luxury of being in a lot more places. I think it's really looking more open-mindedly about your own business and what you need, and then just seeing how many funds you can attract and seeing whether you're in mandate to whether they are able to support you. But I think both places, Hong Kong and Singapore and Hong Kong and Kowloon, have benefits.
Oh, yeah. Now, before I ask a follow-up question to that, do feel free, if anyone has any questions on the floor, do stick your hand up and do let us know. Okay, we've got one over here. Shall we try and get a microphone over there? I'm just going to do the follow-up question, and then we'll get on to you. How do people access the funding schemes that are available in Hong Kong? Because I think there are a fair number of options available. And again, it's sort of dependent on locations you might choose, right?
There are so many, and it's all in different pockets and different heads that point. I mean, so we actually have, at our firm, we have somebody that regularly keeps track of where all the funding is coming from. You've got the BUD, you've got the ITC, you've got Science Park, you've got Raise Plus, you've got UGC, you've got Tissue, and all of these acronyms probably don't mean much to you, but to the startups and the professors, it's everything. Because that's where you get your money from, and that's how you survive. But it's all out there. And I think the Invest Hong Kong and TDC are trying to consolidate everything into a single link or something to try. But I think a lot of them are actually gated, meaning like the ITR, the innovation. Transfer technology. I forget the Grace Lau's translational research. Yeah, Institute of Translational Research. Yes. They have a matching clinical trial grant. We're up to $1 million US, but you have to have been in the Science Park for 1 year before you can qualify for that. And then you have to, there are lots of criteria that you have to you have to be here for long enough. You got to be here dedicated long enough. You got to, your IP has to be from a university. You need to have a local collaborator. Navigating that is something that you just got to do.
You've got to think carefully about what your objectives are.
Yeah.
I think the correct answer is go to contact InvestHK, and they will direct you to all the funding schemes.
Yeah.
Well done. Love it.
Actually,
got the branding in there. Perfect. Let's move on to this gentleman on the floor. So what's your question? Is there anyone specific you'd like to ask it of?
To everyone. With reference to where to set up, we're hearing some noises from official places recently about Hong Kong having its own FDA. Not least because it's easier for startups to have their local regulatory body they can work with rather than having those conversations with an overseas body. Does that make it, with the companies you're investing in and therefore would advise, does that make a difference in where they would choose to set up and to base themselves?
I'll go first. To me, it makes no difference. I have that old school mentality of the world is flat. I think you need to be targeting the large markets anyway. I think the strategy is to target large markets. Tactically, how you get there, you could consider these maybe shorter access paths. But I find that in my actual experience, like the company I worked for last year, Genesis, we licensed one of the top technologies, and the company, and then China in particular, has some special access channels through the special zones. Like some of you might have heard of Hainan as a special zone for some medical policies. And it's great, right? You know, Mayo Clinic built an international hospital there. But what we realized was every single company and partner, like US company that we worked with, we said, do you want to use these sort of special access channels? And they said, actually, no, because we want to do market launch with a big shebang. So we don't want to trickle. Rather, we want to launch concurrently in Guangzhou, Beijing, Shanghai. And actually, that limited access is neither here nor there for us. So I think that's something to consider. That's for one. And two is that when you're doing a local market, I think it's good to have a more convenient place to get and obtain validating data to prove your solution works. You know, that's why I think like phase 1 trials in South Korea and Australia are great, because you can just get them done very, very efficiently. They are harmonized, meaning they are accepted by all the different global regulators. But if you think about it in that way, rather than link your like market with your development team and all that in a particular place, to me, I don't really think about that. I think it's more about where your teammates are, and things are so global anyway. So so to me, it doesn't make a difference.
We don't really know what the Hong Kong FDA will look like. It's still very nebulous. It's a very big idea. Is it going to be primary approval, secondary approval? Are we going to have our own full autonomy to approve something? Or when you have the Southern China NMPA office with 2,000 people in their office, is the Hong Kong government going to hire another 2,000 people to run an agency independently? I don't know.
Yeah, is drug going to be different to device? Yeah. Are there different groups within all of them?
Are you going to take power away from the hospital authority?
Do adcoms, advisory committees?
Yeah. IND, the ethics council going to be revamped? We don't know yet, and there's going to be so many. There's going to be so many internal arguments within the different lobbying blocks in the government itself. But at the end of the day, what you need to do as a startup doesn't change. You're there to target the US and China markets. And as an investor, if you don't have the two markets, I'm not interested. Because those are, you have to, right? And whether or not Hong Kong has an FDA that's blocking or helping you, I wouldn't worry too much about it. Let them figure it out. Let the powers that be wrestle it out, and then we'll just dance to the tune. But at the end of the day, right, we're going for FDA and NMPA,
but more options is a good thing,
yes,
in general, right?
Yeah.
But it might not be in one size fits all, and it probably definitely won't.
What I'm hoping for is for the Hong Kong FDA to clarify and expedite the local procurement and approval processes. So like I hear a lot from big pharma partners where their new product, after many years of trying to get into the hospital authority, they've already got China approval. So then they shut down the whole Hong Kong team and just have a Chinese team to do sales and marketing in China. And Hong Kong missed out on a new drug, a new device, because the system is too slow. And just there's no point in doing the Hong Kong market when it's like that, right? So if the Hong Kong FDA can make it better and not make it more difficult for us to do our job, then I'm happy. And that's what I'm hoping for. And I hope the people that are listening to this are people who have yeah, that's my message. Make it easier for us, please, not harder. It's already really hard.
Do any of you have any sort of concerns about geopolitical factors or anything to do with international relations that you think is holding back innovation in the healthcare tech sector? Or is that something that just doesn't concern you?
No, I think it does. I mean, anytime, like now, with health, it's becoming a lot of digital health data. And then governments are becoming very sensitive about where the data is stored, where it's located. So now, what I predict is that you'll see a lot of companies move out of China or Hong Kong because the data is stored here. That's one of the things I will see.
Yeah, I think if you're, I agree with Joseph on the data side of things, but actually everything that I see is there's no effect at all. And what I mean by that is I think I'm an engineer, pretend to be engineer, ex-engineer, and my counterparties, we all look at things like CFIUS and the blacklist and the US-China as a hassle, actually. We're just trying to develop product and tech and platforms. I couldn't care less about the chip war and this and that, and I find our counterparties are the same. And so what we usually do is we're like, okay, we just need to consider that stuff. And now I have to spend an extra $8,000 on my legal documents because I have to add a CFIUS clause and about the National Defense Act and so forth. And so we handle it. I don't think so much about the implications of the geopolitics and what it means and all that kind of stuff. I just look at it, my work, and I'm like, to do a deal, I just have to add a whole bunch of legal terms that explain what I need to do, what each side has to do in case we get pinged by any office. But generally, I think healthcare, not so controversial. I find that everything I've touched, and my previous company was everything through a small hole, so interventional vascular therapies, minimally invasive stuff. Nothing we touch is generally that controversial, and so we didn't find it to be in scope anyway.
Yeah, and my hope is that it stays that way, right? And Hong Kong is a world city, and let's keep it that way. You look at MD Anderson and CUHK is like almost 20 years now, or like over a decade at least of partnership. You look at there's the new Anderson Shum and at the ABIC Advanced Biomedical Instrumentation Center. Right? It's a Harvard Hong Kong U joint program. Let's do more of those. You got to keep doing those, and don't decouple. There's no point. Science is health, life sciences benefits everybody, and just carry on. Yeah, and don't be too bothered by it. Yeah.
Okay. What about finding talent? Is Hong Kong developing and nurturing the right talent? No. I'm very sorry, but no. And it goes back to the academic system. The KPIs and the incentives that are aligned for academia are fundamentally different from that of business, right? And that then translates down to the PhDs and the students. And back in when I started my own company, I was a student, and a professor, right, wanted me to help him out and do it. And I had quite a bit of autonomy, and I didn't know what I was doing. But I felt like all my classmates around me were sort of in that mojo as well, right? Nobody knew what they were doing. Everybody was trying to Google answers and answer questions. And now they're asking ChatGPT.
Yeah, ChatGPT nowadays, which I think is fine. But then just culturally, that's not Hong Kong. Culturally, that's they want a stable job, consistent income, clear career path. Whereas, well, I mean, back then for me, my thinking was I'll spend 2 years on this project, and if it doesn't work, I'll go back to med school. Was the plan?
Okay.
And it worked out, thankfully. So then I'm not an MD.
You've not had to go back to med school yet.
Much to my disappointment of my parents. But yeah. But I think that's what I'm here to try to do, is to get more of this culture, this ecosystem, this mindset of finding product market fit, scaling up, and going through programs that Joseph and Brinc run, and maybe working with TigerMed and our regulatory team and people who've been through that. Hong Kong just hasn't done it before, and the only way to get better is to do it. And failure is built into the question. I think failure is something that we have to expect and build into the risk models, and I expect people to fail.
And just deal with it.
Yeah, and we just got to keep pushing. Okay.
All right, we have literally 90 seconds left.
But it'll take time. Yeah. It'll take time to build this, right? To build a talent. You start from ground up, and it's going to take years.
Right, so it's all going to take a while. All right, we've got, 90 seconds left. I would like, say, one top tip from each of you to give as a piece of advice to any healthcare startup right now. Go, Joseph.
Keep it simple. Be very focused.
Wow, that was quick.
Well, explain your problems that we're trying to solve in 1 or 2 sentences. That's very easy to explain.
So everyone can understand it.
Correct.
That's it.
Think about the fastest path to FDA approval. Oh yeah, focus on.
You think that's the key to success?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, Adrian, what would you say?
I'm going to use 40 seconds to think about my answer.
Okay, I mean, you could just use 40 seconds for an answer.
I'm just kidding. I think focus on really grilling yourself on defining the problem that you're trying to solve. Again, it's the whole, your customer is not who you think it is. And the second thing is to figure out, to think more broadly. You know, we're all in healthcare, right, generally speaking. And we like to think of solutions as medical solutions. Let me give you an example in infertility. You know, it is a medical condition that's related to age, of course, and so forth. But at the same time, the problem with infertility is also financial, behavioral, socio-economic. So I think mixing a multifactorial solution to a multifactorial problem is actually very powerful. And that's actually where the AI and the tech and how to techify medicine comes in, right? Is you can really harness a lot of the new tools to target a problem that is actually not just purely clinical.
Thank you. Thank you, Joseph. Thank you, Emmanuel. Thank you, Adrian, for all of your top tips today. We're out of time. Thank you for all your questions.